What do you know about Palestine? And what do you know about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which is considered the most controversial conflict since the attacks of the 7th of October? If you start watching this season, you miss the much of the story. Here is a brief of what you need to know in just a few minutes. On the 2nd of November, 1917, Britain's Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour wrote a letter promising to establish a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. At this time, 90% of people living there were not Jews. And the question here, why was Britain making promises about other people's country? A month later, British troops took Palestine, ending 400 years of Ottoman rule. The people who lived there were mostly Muslims, with Christians and Jewish minorities too. There was also a tiny number of European Jews, who in the late 1800s had started building a small colony there. The idea of building up a Jewish presence in Palestine became known as Zionism, but it stayed a fringe movement among European Jews. Many of them felt they shouldn't have to leave their countries to avoid persecution. Zionism took a big step forward with a historian man called Theodor Herzl, and this guy is a critical name in this story. In 1896, he published The Jewish State, and in it he said the only way for the Jews to avoid anti-Semitism was not to leave, but to have their own country. He organized the first Zionist Congress in Basel. The attendees agreed to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine. From here on out, the Zionist movement became very active. A few days after the conference, Herzl wrote, "At Basel, I founded the Jewish state, and in 50 years, everyone will perceive it." That's out of history, but it's important because the Zionist movement is critical to this story. After World War I, the winners set up the League of Nations and distributed the losing territories between them. They called it the mandate system, and Britain was given the mandate over Palestine. But the Palestinian people were never asked what they wanted, or what the independence would look like to them. British rule was very accommodating to the Zionist project. The Jewish community in Palestine grew with big waves of immigration. They had their own militia, the Haganah, and they were led by David Ben-Gurion. It was clear Britain wasn't delivering independence to Palestine, it was delivering the land to other people. In 1937, British government sent a commission called the Peel Commission to draw a line on the map to divide the country, part to the Jews and part to Palestinians. And because Palestinians were the majority on the land, they had to be moved by force to make the Jewish state viable. The revolt continued until 1939, by which time about 10% of Palestinian adult males had been killed, injured, arrested, or exiled. In 1939, Britain imposed limits on Jewish land purchase and immigration to the Zionists. This felt like betrayal to the Zionism. A few years later, it was the time of World War II. More than 16 million people were killed, including 6 million Jews killed in Nazi death camps. Jewish survivors fled Europe, with a large number of them trying to find safety in Palestine, despite the British limit on Jewish immigration. This set off a confrontation between Zionists and Britain. At this time, Zionist was militarily stronger, and Britain was exhausted by World War II. In 1947, and after 30 years of occupation, Britain announced it was quitting Palestine and asked the United Nations to clean up the mess. During British rule, Jews had gone from 10% to 30% of the population and owned about 60% of the land. The Zionist militias had tens of thousands of soldiers, modern rebels, and officers who had already fought in World War II. The Palestinians hadn't allowed to develop their own administration or military or even to have weapons at their homes. As they waited for the United Nations solution, they were the majority all over the land. In November 1947, the United Nations voted to partition Palestine. This plan marks off 55% of the country for the Jewish state. But the United Nations never explained how it could be a Jewish state when the majority were Palestinian. Palestinians and all Arabs rejected this plan, while Ben Gurion and the Zionist leadership saw an opportunity to seize more land and to do what was necessary to reduce the number of Palestinians in it. Militias set up pumps in cities like Haifa and attacked villages to force residents out, as they did in April 1948 when the village of Derasin was attacked. A British government report to the United Nations describes the scene. 250 people were killed, in circumstances of a great savagery. Women and children were stripped, lined up, photographed, and then slaughtered by automatic firing. The story of what happened at Derasin set off panic all over Palestine. History recorded dozens of similar massacres during this period. The target was clear: drive the people out no matter how. In May 1948, David Ben Gurion announced the founding of the State of Israel, with himself as the first Prime Minister. The US President Harry Truman recognized the new nation just after 11 minutes of the announcement. With each successive attempt to resolve this conflict, the land offered to Palestinians in their historic homeland shrinks more and more, while Israel struggles to maintain the population advantage. Today, the population of Jews and non-Jews is roughly equal, while the Palestinians have less than 15% of the land and have no rights, no citizenship, no hope of independence. They have no right to have any rights. Israel made the Palestinians live in an open-air prison, especially in Gaza. Even in prison, you won't be killed for no reason. 80% of people in Gaza are refugees, and about half the population are children. There is no way to escape when the bomb starts, and they know they may not have the chance to get older. Israel kills them all day and every day. Gaza became a graveyard of children, according to the United Nations. In the end, do you believe that Israel has any right to defend itself? And do you still believe that it really starts at the 7th of October? And let me ask, if you were a Palestinian living in West Bank or Gaza, what would your view be of Israel?